Hi everybody, my name is Anna, and on our Holy Week Devotionals, we have come to the point of Good Friday. When I was little growing up, I always mixed up the words Good Friday and Black Friday. See, something in my brain told me that there was nothing good about this day, that the stories of Jesus being arrested, being brought before trials, being mocked, being beaten, and ultimately crucified, in my child's brain, nothing about that was good. Everything seemed very dark. And while I know this story leads to our redemption, and it leads to our reconciliation, and it leads to every good promise of God being fulfilled, the events of that day just feel so dark. It was a day where darkness seemed to have won, and nothing was going as it should. Today I want to talk about the stories of Jesus on trial, and you can find these in Matthew 26 and 27 and Luke 22 and 23. Those are the accounts that I've been studying and looking at, and I want to share some of the things that I noticed with you. See, after Jesus was arrested, he was in the garden with his friends, and in the middle of the night, all of the Jewish officials came out to arrest him, and Judas betrayed him. The rest of the disciples rose up around him, ready for Jesus to step in and be exactly who they thought he should be, the Messiah, the Christ, the King of the Jews. And they were ready for him to start overthrowing the Roman oppression that had so taken over their entire community. So much so that Peter drew a sword and sliced off the ear of one of the servants who was there to arrest Jesus. But Jesus didn't do what they thought. Instead of overthrowing and fighting and running and standing up for what was good and holy in the minds of Israel, he instead submitted, and he healed his oppressor, and he went off quietly into his arrest. Nothing was going as they thought it should. The first trial that Jesus is brought before is the Sanhedrin. And this is a council of Jewish officials. It's the client kings of Rome. It's the people who ran the temples. It's the Pharisees. It's the Sadducees. It's everyone important who has wealth and power in the community. And they came together to decide the fate of this man named Jesus. And when they were deciding his fate, they had already decided what they wanted, and they wanted his death. But they had to find a way to prove it. So they tried desperately. It says in the scriptures that they couldn't find any false witnesses, though. They couldn't find any false accusations. The only thing that they could accuse Jesus of was being exactly who we know him to be. So finally, after hours of them accusing and having it stripped away, these two men arose and they said, Jesus said that he would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. And this struck a chord with everyone in the room, and they turned to Jesus and say, "Is this true? Are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God?" Because these words were a direct prophecy from the ancient scriptures that foretold of all that Jesus was going to be. So for Jesus to claim that he was what the prophecies foretold meant that he would have to be the Son of God. And Jesus simply answered them, "You have said so." And at this, the room erupts and they start saying, "Blasphemy, blasphemy, you have heard it from his own mouth." And they start ridiculing him, mocking him, and they condemn him to his death. They start slapping him, saying, "Prophesy, O great prophet, who hit you? Who struck you?" The very words of their accusation were rooted in truth, but it somehow didn't lead to their freedom. From this one trial, they then bring him to the next. They bring him before the Roman officials, the political overhead of the region, because while the Sanhedrin had religious influence and social influence, they didn't have the right to actually condemn him to death. So they brought him before Pilate. Now, Pilate is a man in history that appears in the Bible, but he appears way more often in antiquity, in the historical accounts of Israel at that time, in Roman history, because he was not a great guy. He was actually known for leading one of these mass genocides in Jerusalem, where he called all of Jerusalem together because there had been all of these insurrections and people trying to overthrow Rome. So he called everyone into the town square and he hid his guards amongst them and in plain street clothes. And as he gave this speech calling for peace, he hid in it a Q word so that when he spoke this one line, all of his soldiers knew to begin striking everyone around them until they were dead. And this day is cited as being one of the bloodiest days in Jerusalem's history. And it's said that the blood of Israel ran through the aqueducts of Rome, that it was this time that was horrible, and it caused Israel to create such an outcry that it made it all the way up to Rome. And Rome sent a notice back to Pilate saying, if there is any more unrest in your town, it will be your life. So now Pilate is in a position where he is a man of great power, a man of great vengeance, a man who is not afraid of bloodshed, but he is now mandated to keep the peace. So when the Sanhedrin comes with this man named Jesus, they know all the right words to say to make Pilate do exactly what they want. They say that he's an insurrector, that he's claiming to be the king of the Jews, that his message is stirring unrest throughout the entire city, that everything he is exactly what Pilate has been called to keep at peace. So if Pilate wants to keep the peace and ultimately his life, he must do exactly what they say and get rid of this guy named Jesus. So Pilate interviews him. He looks at Jesus, he hears all the claims, and he sees that Jesus is silent. So finally he addresses him and says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus simply answers all of the inquiry with, "You have said so." And it doesn't sit well with Pilate. He says, "I have the power to free you. I have everything you need to be released. Why won't you fight for yourself? Why won't you advocate here?" And in one account of the Gospels, he actually sends Jesus over to Herod, who is a Jewish leader, but is at the will of Rome. He's what we call a client king. And he sends Jesus over to Herod. Herod and Pilate don't really get along, but he's excited to have Jesus here because Herod has heard of the power of Jesus and has wanted to meet him all along. So when Herod gets a hold of Jesus and quizzes him the same way to see if there's any political basis for them to execute Jesus, he also is not able to find any reason or fault against Jesus for him to be condemned to death. But because Jesus won't answer, his desire to meet him turns to mocking him. What a fool is he that he won't stand up and fight. He must be weak. He must not be who he says he is. He certainly couldn't be the king of the Jews because I'm the king of the Jews. In Herod's mind, that would be. And he's not trying to overthrow me. So they beat him, they slap him, they dress him up like a king, and then they send him back to Pilate. And the scriptures say that from that day, Pilate and Herod became friends. And he returns Jesus saying, "I have no reason to condemn this man." So with Jesus back in his hands, Pilate looks at the Jewish council and he says, "I have no reason to condemn this man." But as custom in this time, at the time of Passover, they always released one Jewish prisoner and pardoned him. And he says, "Would you like me to release him? I can punish him and then I can release him, but I can't condemn him to death." And the Jewish crowd is insistent. "We want you to release Barabbas. You must condemn Jesus. You must condemn the guy who says that he is the king of the Jews." So Pilate released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder. He released the one that the Jewish council asked for, and he surrendered Jesus to their will and washed his hands of the matter. Nothing was going the way that it should. Religion had led people to sin. It's so ironic that the leaders of faith, the people who were supposed to know God the best, ended up rejecting God because he didn't come the way that they wanted. He didn't come the way that they expected, and therefore he certainly couldn't be the God that they had asked for. These people of religion were led into sin. Nothing was going the way that it should. And evil saw innocence. Both Herod and Pilate, they were the most hated people in Israel, and they worked together in this situation. They wanted to see Jesus move in power. Unity was found between them. They became friends through this situation. They couldn't be bought by the lies of the Jewish council. The evil ones saw the innocence of Jesus, and they declared him as innocent. Nothing was going the way that it should. and the guilty was declared guiltless. Barabbas, the one who was actually guilty of insurrection, what they were trying to accuse Jesus of to Rome, the one who was guilty of murder, the one who was worthy of Rome's fear, was deemed guiltless and set free. Nothing was going the way that it should. And eventually the innocent was hung with criminals. He was condemned as Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the King of the Jews. The very words of their accusation could have been the words of their freedom. But in order to accept their freedom, the Council of Israel, all of the Jewish leaders, they would have had to face their pride, their desire for control, and their utter insufficiency to be the Savior that they so desperately needed. What's interesting is when we look back at Luke chapter 22, when the Sanhedrin was quizzing Jesus, when they had him on trial, what Jesus responds to them with is this. He says, "If I tell you who I am, you will not believe me. And if I asked you, you would not answer." See, to believe in these words, to believe that Jesus was the Messiah and the Christ, it would bring them face to face with their brokenness. And it's not something that anyone wants to do. But the line between their words of accusation and the words of belief was their surrender. And suddenly I start to resonate with the Jewish leaders in the council. Because how often do I hold before that line? In the moments of life where nothing seems to be going the way that I thought, how often does my heart respond in those situations to say, "God, you're sovereign, fix this. God, you're in control, get it together. God, you're my provider. Can you do this? Can you help me? God, you're good, so make this better." How often are the words of my mouth rooted in the truth of God, but actually emerge as accusations more than belief? The line between accusation and belief is surrender. It's surrender to the reality of my brokenness. It's surrender to the depths of my own insufficiency. It's surrender to my idea of how things should have gone. And in this place of surrender, in this place where I am real about what is actually happening around me and who I actually am, it's there that I'm able to cross from accusation into belief. Because when I lay down what should be, I'm able to accept and believe that He is good over my idea of good. I'm able to believe in His sufficient redemption. I'm able to believe in His love, His way, because He decided that I was worthy of it. He's the Messiah for my broken self, not the version that I've bandaged and fixed and cleaned up along the way. The words of their accusation became the words of my freedom. Jesus Christ, Messiah, King. He was the one who was the Son of God, and He was put to death. But fortunately, nothing was going as it should that day. And even though He was put to death, He did not stay in death. And just as He was accused, He destroyed the temple. He destroyed the way that we met with God. And He rebuilt a new way in just 3 days. He is the new way, and He is enough. He is a way that allows us to receive the present love of God, the way that it always should be. On this Good Friday, I want to bless you in prayer to receive this present love of God. So, Father, may You anoint us with Your courage to surrender. As we hold that line between accusation and belief, God, would You be the force, the loving, driving force that pushes us into surrender? Would You call us gently in Your kindness and invite us to say yes to You? We love You so much, and it's through the gift of Your Son that we say, amen. We look forward to seeing you at our Good Friday services this evening at 5 and 7. And if we are able to see you again tomorrow morning for the rest of our Holy Week Devotionals, we would love to see you there too. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.